Good morning, friends. Welcome to the 21st lecture or week 21 of Samachar Manthan. So, we will be starting from the main part, and the first issue is crisis in Sri Lanka. So, as you must have seen or you must have read in the newspapers, that Mahinda Rajapakse, the ex-president of Sri Lanka, has again become the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, and the President of Sri Lanka, Sri Sena, he sacked the Prime Minister Vikram Singhe and he appointed Mahinda Rajapakse as the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka. So before understanding the topic like we do in the IR related topics, we go to the background. We first understand the internal politics and the constitution of Sri Lanka, because without understanding that, you would not understand the current crisis. So Sri Lanka, like India, is a democratic state, and like India, it has many political parties, but there are mainly two main political parties. Just like in India, we have BJP and the Congress. In Sri Lanka, we have UNP and the Sri Lanka Freedom Party. UNP is United National Party. So the founder of UNP was D.S. Senanayake, who was also the first Prime Minister of Sri Lanka and who was also considered as a father of Sri Lankan freedom movement, just like Mahatma Gandhi in India. Sri Lanka Freedom Party was founded by Solomon Bandaranaike, who was and just like the Nehru and Gandhi family in India, just like the Bhuttos in Pakistan, he represents the most important political dynasty in Sri Lanka. So after his assassination, his wife Shri Mao Bandaranaike became the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, who was also the first female Prime Minister anywhere in the world. And also their daughter Chandrika Kumaratunga, she also became the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka in 1990s. So when we talk of the political leanings of this party represents what you call a center right. So it is more of a pro market, pro capitalist and pro landlord party. Therefore the West likes UNP. When we talk of Sri Lanka Freedom Party, it is a center left party, but its ideology is based on Sinhalese nationalism. So now when we talk of the contemporary scenario, so as you know that Mahinda Rajapakse was the president of Sri Lanka during or between 2005 to 2015, and during his time he moved Sri Lanka closer to China. He also ended the LTT movement. He actually, using his army, he launched a full-fledged war against the Tamilians who were sympathetic to Litte, and finally he killed Prabhakaran, who was the leader of the LTTT, and he finally ended the movement. After he ended the movement, he became very autocratic. He started destroying the institutions. He kind of propagated what you call as extreme Buddhist or extreme Sinhalese nationalism, which actually made the minority Tamil Hindus and the Muslims little apprehensive. He started, interfering with the judiciary. He started interfering with the investigating agencies, and in finally 2000, and he represented. So Rajapakse represented the Sri Lanka Freedom Party. the same party which was founded by Bandar Naike, whose wife and whose daughter was the president of Sri Lanka. Now in 2014, the health minister in the cabinet of Rajpakse, he resigned. His name was M. Sirisena, who is now the current president of Sri Lanka. So Sirisena resigned, and then Sirisena was announced as a joint candidate of a faction of Sri Lanka Freedom Party and the opposition UNP and other groups. So all the opposition parties, like we are having in India, that all the non-BJP parties are getting united to defeat Modi. Same thing happened in 2014 in Sri Lanka, because Rajpakse was destroying all the institutions and the democracy was in danger. So therefore, all the opposition parties, including some faction of Sri Lanka Freedom Party, which Rajpakse represented and whose member was also Sri Sena, they all kind of announced their support to Sri Sena as a presidential candidate for next year. So when we talk of Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka is semi-presidential and semi-prime ministerial type of system. So in Sri Lanka, the day-to-day policy decisions are taken by Prime Minister, but the overall in charge of defense is the president. So, but what Rajpakse was doing, that Rajpakse was making the post of president more powerful. But later in 2015, through amendment, actual power or a significant amount of power passed to the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka from the President of Sri Lanka. So in 2014, finally, so in 2015 elections, much to the surprise of Western India, Rajpakse was defeated and M. Sri Sena came to power. He became the president of Sri Lanka. When we talk of parliamentary system, in the parliamentary elections, out of 225 seats, the UNP got 107 seats. Sri Lanka Freedom Party, the party of Rajpakse, got 95 seats. So as you know, that Sri Lanka Freedom Party, some faction of Sri Lanka Freedom Party supported Sri Sena. So some part or around 40 of 95 members of Sri Lanka Freedom Party announced their support for UNP. So 107 plus 40, which means that UNP was appointed into the government by the President M. Sri Sena, and he appointed Vikram Singhe as the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka. Now, Vikram Singhe was an old hand. He was also the Prime Minister in 1990s also. And Vikram Singhe was considered to be pro-India and little anti-China person. And India was therefore very happy with the outcome that finally Rajpakse was defeated. The Prime Minister is of our choice. The President is also of our choice. But the problem started after the government was formed, because as you know that a unity government was formed in Sri Lanka, because half of the cabinet members of Vikram Singhe were from the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, the part of Sri Lanka Freedom Party that has showed allegiance to M. Sri Sena, and half of the members were from the UNP. And in Sri Lanka, UNP and Sri Lanka Freedom Party are as different as Congress and BJP. So you can just imagine a government in India, a unity government of India, where in a cabinet, half members are from Congress and half are from BJP. It's very unlikely that that government will work in long run. As we have seen in Bihar, where Lalu and Nitish came, and then after 2 years they broke, because they whole their life these people fought against each other. And when you tell them to be colleagues, it's very different. The kind of coordination becomes really different. It happened in India in 1977, where Janata Party was formed after the merger of very different, divergent ideological groups. It could not run, right? So same thing. The problem started in Sri Lanka also. There were corruption charges on the government, and Sri Sena was not happy with that. And also, in April, there was a news in Sri Lanka that a cabinet minister belonging to the UNP, the party of Vikram Singhe, he is kind of planning the he is planning the assassination of President Sri Sena. And as you know, Sri Lanka has a history of political assassinations. The president Bandar Naike, he was also assassinated in 1959. So this increased the differences which were already growing since last 3 years between the UNP led or between the Vikram Singhe led UNP and the Sri Lankan Freedom Party M. Sri Sena led Sri Lanka Freedom Party. So what happened recently was that M. Sri Sena, the president of Sri Lanka, sacked the Prime Minister Vikram Singhe and appointed Mahinda Rajapakse as the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka. As you know, there have been 2-3 problems with the decision. First is that Sri Lanka in 2015 it made a 19th constitutional amendment, and that constitutional amendment said that the president of Sri Lanka cannot sack the prime minister at its will. The prime minister can only be removed if on the floor of the house it cannot prove the majority. But M. Sri Sena did like this. He kind of, without telling Vikram Singhe to prove his majority in parliament in next 2 weeks or 3 weeks, without doing that, he sacked him in front place. So UNP and Vikram Singhe are saying that the decision of M. Sri Sena is unconstitutional. Therefore, Vikram Singhe has announced that he still is the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, and he refuses to vacate the official residence of Prime Minister of Sri Lanka. What M. Sri Sena did, M. Sri Sena postponed the proceedings of the Parliament of Sri Lanka till 16 November. So he did the same thing which the governor in Karnataka did for the BJP. What he did is that he is giving ample time to Rajapakse to split the UNP party, because as you know, Sri Lanka Freedom Party, if you include both Rajapakse camp and the Sri Sena camp, it has only 95 seats and the majority is 113. So therefore, it still requires 18 seats to prove its majority, right? So this 2 weeks time, according to UNP, is given because it will motivate Rajapakse to intimidate, to threaten MPs from UNP to split UNP, so that Sri Lanka Freedom Party under Rajapakse gets the number in the parliament and he can remain in the office of Prime Minister for long. So this is the whole crisis in Sri Lanka. Now why is India kind of concerned? India is concerned because Rajapakse literally sold off Sri Lanka to China. And it's actually the people in Sri Lanka are also angry because Sri Lanka took so many loans from China that it has now in a kind of a debt trap. And as you know that Hambantota, for developing Hambantota, the Sri Lanka took $1.2 billion of loan from China. Now, the Sri Lanka government did not have money to repay the loan to China. So therefore, last year, what the government in Sri Lanka did, it leased the Hambantota port to Chinese for 99 years because it says that we don't have the money to kind of pay you back. And this is the whole Chinese policy all about. Give so much loan to that country so that it cannot repay. Once it will not repay, it will force, or it has no other alternative but to give that asset to China on lease. That is the whole policy of China. That is the whole kind of policy of China is all about. Now, India fears that the Vikram Singhe was more of a pro-India guy. He was little apprehensive of Chinese because, as you know, Vikram Singhe was a a very pro-Western leader. He believed in market reforms, he believed in ease of doing business, and therefore he was apprehensive of Chinese because Chinese terms were more of a dictation. It was not a very favorable terms for the Chinese, and therefore Vikram Singhe was looking for India. It was looking towards India to fulfill the investment needs of Sri Lanka. Therefore, India was very happy with Vikram Singhe as Prime Minister. Now with Rajpakshe as Prime Minister and M. Sri Sena also supporting Rajpakshe, there is a fear in India's security establishment that the Sri Lankan policy would again drift back towards China like it used to do, or like it used to be in the pre-200 to 2015 era. Therefore, India is concerned. China has thrown its back behind Rajpakshe. It is supporting Rajpakshe. The West it's criticizing M. Sri Sena for its unconstitutional decision. Now the ball is in two areas. One is in the parliament, whether Rajpakshe will be able to prove his majority. Second, whether the court will interfere, because sacking of prime minister is an unconstitutional decision according to the Article 19 of Sri Lanka. What India is doing, India is waiting and watching. It is neither kind of accepted Rajpakshe as Prime Minister, neither it has rejected or criticized Rajpakshe as Prime Minister, because India knows that if we will put our weight behind one political party, it will tend to alienate the other political party. Because like we did in Maldives, like we did in Nepal, we threw our back behind the Nepalese Congress, which alienated the Maoist groups. Same thing happened in Maldives. We threw our back behind Nasheed, which alienated the other political parties. So we have learned from the mistake, and we are saying we will deal with anyone who is in power in Sri Lanka, whether it's Vikram Singhe or it's Rajpaksha. But India is hoping, India is willing that Vikram Singhe will be back, or he should be back as a Prime Minister of Sri Lanka. If he will not be back, India will have to deal with Rajpakshe. So this is all about the Sri Lankan crisis, and I hope you understand all the background of the crisis. Let's move to the next topic. So let's end the IR topics first, and then we will move to economics and polity topics. Next is PM Modi's visit to Japan. So PM Modi has recently visited Japan as a part of annual dialogue or annual India-Japan summit, which was institutionalized in 2006. But since 2016, every year, the Indian Prime Minister and the Japanese Prime Minister are meeting, 1 year in India and 1 year in Japan. So let us understand first the background of India and Japan relations. So first is cultural / historical. So when we talk of historical and culture, the India-Japanese relations start with the birth of Buddhism in India, and the monks in India, they spread Buddhism in Japan also. Therefore, a significant part of Japanese population became Buddhist, and that increased the India's soft power in Japan. If we talk of modern era, Subhash Chandra Bose, INA, took the help of Japanese to fight against the British Army. Also, recently, there has been sister city arrangement launched with Japan with the signing of Kyoto and Varanasi Pact. Now let's look at economic relations. So India is the biggest recipient of Japanese official development assistance. This is what Japan give to the developing countries for its development projects. Also, the total trade between India and Japan is around 14.51 billion, which has reduced from the peak of 18 billion in 2013. Next is India and Japan have signed SEPA in 2011, and I have in one of the lectures I have actually explained the difference between SECA, SEPA, FTA and PTA. So you should watch that lecture for understanding of SEPA and SECA. Also, Japan is third largest or source of FDI for India. Also, Japan has invested heavily in DMIC or Delhi Mumbai Industrial Corridor, and also Japan is helping India to make its first high-speed rail. Let's now look at strategic relations. So when we talk of strategic relations, India and Japan both have they are apprehensive with the growth of China in the Indo-Pacific region, both fear of China, therefore they have grown strategically close in last 1 decade. So India and Japan, they have signed a pact, and that pact is called a special strategic partnership pact. India and Japan also undergo naval exercise every year, which is called as Malabar exercise. So India and US used to do the Malabar exercise. Now Japan is also included in that. Also, India and Japan are part of Quad arrangement, which is a grouping of India, Japan, Australia and US to counter the rise of China or to counter the Chinese expansionist designs in the Indo-Pacific region. Then also India and Japan has signed a civil nuclear deal last year. We have also launched Asia-Africa Growth Corridor last year, and this would develop the infrastructure in the African countries. Now let's look at the areas of common concern for both India and Japan. So when we talk of common concern, both India and Japan are concerned with the rise of China, because China has island disputes with Japan, and India has the border dispute with China, and India is also apprehensive with increasing interference of China in our neighborhood. We are also concerned with growing Chinese influence in the Indian Ocean region, which we always used to consider as our backyard. And also with US, we are concerned with US because US has, under Trump, is going crazy, and it's increasing tariffs. It's talking with North Korea. It's exiting from international economic groups like TPP, TTIP. So this has made both India apprehensive, because India, as you know, would like to have a free trade. Plus, also US has increased the guidelines for issuance of visa to Indian professionals. With US talking with North Korea is making Japan apprehensive. So we both have a common concerns, which is how to deal with US under Trump and China's ever-growing expansionist design in the Indo-Pacific region. When we talk of advantages of bilateral relations, let's now look at the advantages of bilateral relationship between India and Japan. So Japan wants India because Japan depends on sea lanes of communication for its growth, because Japan has limited resources. It is more of an export and import oriented economy. For that, it requires the sea lane of communication or freedom of navigation in the important sea lanes of navigation in the world, or sea lanes of communication in the world. And Japan, as you know, is apprehensive with China. China is ever increasing its influence in the South China Sea, and Japan, because of constitution, it cannot arm itself militarily. There's a foundation on its army, on the kind of weapons it can acquire. Therefore, Japan wants to have a closer relationship with India, because India, he knows, has a very strong naval presence. It has a very strong military, and it can help check the expansionist Chinese designs in the Indo-Pacific and in the Indo-Asian region. And Japan also believes that joint collaboration between India and Japan could help check the Chinese activities in the region. India, and also Japan wants India because India has launched number of initiatives like smart cities, Make in India, and all these things, Skill India. And Japan is, the economy of Japan is slowing down from last 2 decades, and therefore it is looking for a market for its goods. It is also looking for India for supply of rare earth materials, because it wants to reduce its economic dependence on China. Because China, as you know, as I have dealt in the last lecture also, probably the last to last lecture, that China sometimes uses economic to coerce the foreign policy of other country. So when there was clash between Japan and China over the islands few years back, China stopped supplying rare earth materials to Japan, which is required for the electronic industry of Japan. Therefore, Japan wants India to replace China as a supplier of rare earth materials. Why do India want China? Why do India want Japan? Because India is a technologically deficient country, and we require Japan for assistance in our infrastructure projects. We require Japan for helping in Skill India project, and we require Japan to counter China in the Indo-Pacific region. So the relationship between India and Japan are of mutual interest. We are with both countries of which will help each other in solving the issues with respect to economics and geopolitics. So what are the loose ends in the bilateral relationship? First issue is land acquisition issue. So Japan is concerned that we are giving you the loan, and in the recent visit of Modi, Japan has given 5,500 crore of loan to India for starting the bullet train project. But India has a problem, that there is a land acquisition issue problem, and Japan is concerned about that we will give you loan, but how will you acquire so much land required for developing DMIC and developing the bullet train project? So without land acquisition, these projects will be a non-starter. Second issue is with respect to trade. So the trade between India and Japan is nothing, $14 billion. It was $18 billion 4 years back, 5 years back. And with so much closeness in leadership, it has actually fallen to $14. Compare it with India and China, 71 billions. China and Japan, 290 billions. China and Japan, which don't go together, they trade almost $300 billion. Their trade is almost $300 billion. And when we talk of India, India and Japan trade is just 14, paltry $14 billion. So we have so many, we have signed CEPA and everything, but trade is a major issue because, I mean, without trade, how can we say that Japan and India are closest partners? Also, Japan is apprehensive in transferring military hardware to India. Japan, so India was, negotiating with Japan with respect to the sale of amphibious aircrafts, but Japan refused to do that, and Japan is little, it does not want to involve in the kind of the business of arms export. Fourth issue is that Japan is not interested in listening to India's dispute with China. So while Japan wants India's support to counter China in the Indo-Pacific. When we talk of border dispute that India has with China, Japan, it is not very much interested in doing that. I mean, Japan wants India's help in Indo-Pacific, but when India says to Japan, you also help us in pressurizing China with respect to the border dispute that we have with China, Japan says that we are neutral in that issue. We don't have anything to do with that. It is your problem. You have to solve that. So that is also an irritant for India, because India believes that there should be mutual cooperation. I mean, we are cooperating with you in Indo-Pacific. You should also cooperate with us in kind of isolating China with respect to the Indo border or Indo-China border dispute. So what is the way forward? How could we take the relationship between India and China to its potential? So both India and Japan the relations between India and Japan has increased significantly in last few years. We have had the chemistry of Abe and Modi is very, very nice. Recently, Abe took Modi to his personal villa, and Modi is the first international guest to be taken to the personal villa of Prime Minister Abe. So in every respect, the closeness, the psychological closeness between India and Japan has increased significantly, but that has not actually taken to the ground. Summits में तो बहुत बड़ी बड़ी बातें होती हैं कि हम ये करेंगे, हम वो करेंगे, हम इंडो पैसिफिक में एक दूसरे को रिस्पेक्ट करेंगे एंड ऑल दीज थिंग्स, बट वो ग्राउंड लेवल पे इंप्लीमेंट नहीं हो पाता. वो ग्राउंड लेवल पे, सी, वी हैव साइंड सीपा with Japan. We have created a fast track body in the Ministry of Finance to expedite the investments from Japan, but all these things has not resulted into increase in trade between India and Japan. The trade remains paltry at $14 billion, which has actually reduced from last 4 years. So what we have to do is that first thing we have to do is we have to We will have to take the vision or the things to the ground level. That should actually work on ground. Announcing all these things that we will cooperate in Indo-Pacific will not result in anything unless and until we start, the navies and the armies of both the countries start coordinating with each other, start cooperating with each other, start helping the Southeast Asian countries. Only then, people will realize that yes, things are working on the ground. Same goes with economy. We should actually, make it an institution and make it accountable that you are there for promoting trade between India and Japan. 2 years have passed. Why has the trade not increased? So we will have to make the institutions accountable that you are there for improving trade and trade relations, and it's not happening. So you will have to go. So this kind of accountability mechanism has to be established. And also we need to, we must coordinate and cooperate together. So as you know that India does not have the deep pockets like China when it comes to infrastructure projects. That is why all our neighbors, they go for China, they take loan from China, and as you know that Chinese loans are exploitative. It is about a debt trap. We'll give you loan, but then you will have to repay back in few years, and if you can't repay, you will have to lease your asset to us. This is and therefore our neighbors they have started becoming apprehensive with the Chinese intentions. But they cannot look to India because India does not have the deeper pockets. So what we can do is that if India and Japan can together collaborate and start investing in infrastructure projects in South Asia, in our neighborhoods, it will motivate our neighbors to look beyond China and accept our aid. Because our aid, as you know, will not be exploitative, will not be resource grabbing kind of, or not with the intention of the resource grabbing, as is the case with the China. So therefore, India and Japan should collaborate. Same, we should also collaborate in Africa. So though we have announced the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor, but this Asia-Africa Growth Corridor is also on the books. It has not been started on reality. It has not started working on the ground. So we should also ensure that Asia-Africa Growth Corridor should actually work on ground, just like the Chinese One Belt One Road initiative. Because same problem is with Africa also. The African countries are also apprehensive of Chinese because they are also going into the debt trap like China, like the countries of South Asia. So they are also looking towards India and Japan to help, and together we have enough resources and expertise to replace China as a major investor in Africa. Also we should, so all these things we should cooperate and collaborate in order to practice what we are preaching in all the summits. So this ends the second issue of the week, which is PM Modi's visit to Japan. Let's now deal with the next topic, third topic, which is prison reforms in India. So in India, this topic was in news. Why I am taking this topic? Because last month, Supreme Court has formed a committee on prison reforms, and it will be headed by a retired Supreme Court judge, Justice Amitav Roy. And this committee will look into the problems being faced by the prisoners in prison in India and what should be the solution to this problem. Earlier also, the government had announced A.N. Mullah and Justice Krishna Iyer committee in 1980s, and these committees have recommended, but just like every other committee, the recommendations are not accepted by the government. So let us first look at the history of prisons in India. So since the time of the establishment of empire in India, we had prisons. But during the Hindu and the Muslim period, the prisons in India, they were in a very, very bad condition, because the idea of prison was to deter the prisoner and to spread a fear among the masses not to do this kind of crime. So there was no attention given to the prisoners. It was complete torture and third degree. There was cutting of arms, there was, cutting of head, and the kings paid no heed to the problems faced by prisoners, because it was considered, it was socially acceptable that since these prisoners have committed crimes, heinous crimes, they have no human rights of themselves. Then came the British, and during the British time, first time the government announced, or government brought what you call as rule of law. So rule of law was brought, and it was considered as that Britain was very much focused on its image. So some enlightened officials in the British government in India, when they looked towards the prison and the condition, they felt really bad. They believed that these prisoners have some human rights also, and the condition of prisons in India are really bad. So therefore, in 1862, the jail inquiry committee was formed, and this inquiry committee expressed concerns for the insanitary conditions of Indian prisoners, which results in death of prisoners, or which results in death of large number of prisoners every year. And therefore Indian Prisons Act was enacted. In 1894, and Indian Prison Acts tried to establish a uniform standards in all the prisons across India, because every state had different kind of situation. So to bring uniformity, the Indian Prison Act of 1894 tried to say these are the rights of the prisoners, these are the rights, or these are the kinds of torture the jailer can do, and these are the type of torture the jailer cannot do. So why do we need reforms in India? Why do we need prison reforms in India? Well, we need these reforms in India, firstly because the Act of 1894 is obsolete now. I mean, it's been 124 years. We have become democracy. We have reformed all our laws, but in the prison of India, the law which decides the treatment is based on it was enacted in 1894, when the condition was different, when India was being ruled by an autocratic state, when there was no human rights, when there was no democracy, when there was no freedom of expression. And how could we allow the obsolete and the archaic act like 1894 Prisoners Act to kind of continue? So therefore we need a prison reforms. Second reason why we need is because of the prison stats of India, which was brought out by NCRB. It highlighted dismal condition of prisoners in India. So when we talk of condition of prisoners in India, around 67% prisoners are under trials. So these are people who have not been convicted by the law, whose case is still running in the court, and till the verdict will not be announced, they will be in jail. And it's 67% of the total number. In developed countries like UK and US, this number is 11 to 15%. And in India, it is the majority of prisoners. And the reason behind this huge number of under trial is because of poverty, lack of awareness, and slow criminal justice system in India. It takes years for case to run. The poor people don't have the money to go for bail. The poor people are not aware of the legal provisions which it can use to get out of the jail. So all these reasons are responsible for increase in population of under trial in India. Also, the occupancy rates in India's jail is 114%, which means that in jails there are more people living than there is space. So this leads to the problem of overcrowding, and overcrowding problem sometimes results in fights and brawls, which ultimately leads to killing of some prisoners. Also, imprisonment in India, they affect the prisoners and also the family living in poverty line. So in many houses, the main breadwinner, he is arrested, and when he is arrested, it costs the family double burden. First burden is that the main breadwinner is gone. Now who will earn for the family? The second kind of burden is that the family will have to arrange a lawyer and all these things. It will have to go and meet the thing. All these also cost. Also, it is also expensive. So this is one of the major reasons, or one of the important reasons why many families in India, they have shifted to poverty. They have crossed the poverty line because of the expensive legal structure in India. Also, in prison, the health environment is very poor. So most of the prisoners who live in prison, when they come out, they face serious health problems, because there is hardly any space for air to come. It's very dark. The health facilities are not very good in jail. The doctor is not good in jail. The jail authorities don't take care of the prisoners. All this result, or plus it's a depressing atmosphere. All this results in the prisoners facing serious health issues. Also, there is a problem of psychological problems. So there was a report which said that around 40% of Indian prisoners face psychological problems. See, when you isolate someone, when you have no one to talk, when you stay all your day in a small kind of jail chamber, it will definitely take a toll on your mental health. And plus, even though court has mandated that all these prisoners should our psychologists should visit them regularly, but it has not happened in the case of India, it has not happened on ground. So most of them have become, most of the prisoners have become depression. They have a problem of depression. Many of them even commit suicide. Also, there is inadequate maintenance of prison. So most these prisons were built during the British era, and they have the infrastructure has completely crumbled, but government has not kind of repaired them. And this is also, the reason why the living condition in prison is so bad. Also, there is restricted access to legal representatives. So most of the prisoners in jail, they are illiterate. According to stats, around 67%, or most of them, 67%, 71% of them are either illiterate or they have not passed class 10th. So they are not aware with the legal provisions, and this is the reason why many of them continue in jail, because they don't know that they can go out of the jail, and it's a duty of the jail authorities to provide them with best legal facilities, but they also don't do that. Also, lastly, there is lack of inspection. So while the law mandates that there should be CCTV camera installed in all the prisons, but it has not been done. Also, there is a law which says that there will be regular inspection by the members of human rights groups, by NHRC, etc., in these prisons to check the conditions of the prisoners, but that has also not happened, or that has not happened regularly. So all those, and lastly, torture. So as you know that India's prison are still governed by the 1894 Act, and 1894 Act gives emphasis on torture to bring the prisoners in order, and this is the most prescribed type of treatment which the jailers give in order to mold a prisoner. So this is also one of the problem. So let's now look at the reforms needed. Firstly, first suggestion is that non-violent offender should be dealt with differently. So experts say that these people who commit these white collar crimes, they when they go to jail and live with those hardened criminals, after 5 years, rather than being reformed, they actually become more depressed. Many of them commit suicide, and rather than reforming, they transform into hardened criminal. Therefore, one suggestion given is that the white collar criminals, what the law should be made like this, that if you commit a white collar crime and if you are caught, you will be penalized. First of all your property will be seized. Secondly, you will have to pay extra compensation to the government. This will be a better deterrent to them rather than taking them to jail and making them a hardened criminal. Because when government will take all your property plus you have to pay extra fine, this will be a big kind of punishment, because ultimately you will lose everything and you will be in debts. So that will reduce the population in prison, and that will also be a better deterrent for the white collar criminals. Next is, or next suggestion given is that the women prisoners should be treated more generously and should be allowed to meet with their children frequently. Next is that the prisoners belonging to the peasant class, they should be allowed to go to the farm during the agriculture or during the sowing season, because many of these farmers, they are the sole breadwinner of the family, and when they go to jail, their family, as I've discussed, they kind of fall in the trap of poverty. Therefore, we should allow them, or at least allow those farmers who have committed non-violent crimes to be allowed to go to the field during the agriculture season. Next is those people who have been wrongfully detained, there should be a provision for compensation to them by the state. So if somebody is in under trial for and is spent 5 years in jail, and after 5 year court acquits a person, then the state should pay compensation to that person for his rehabilitation and for the torture he has to face in the last 5 years. So this is also a reform suggested by the expert. Also, there should be regular visit of psychologist. CCTV camera should be installed, and there should be regular inspection by human rights group. Also, the government should go for a skill development skill development program for prisoners. So if you know about the example of Kiran Bedi, when Kiran Bedi was the IG of the prisons of Tihar jail, she started this practice of inculcating skill development in the prisoners, and they started making crafts, they started making chairs, they started doing something productive in life which will help the economy. And that actually, when many of them when they came out of jail, they became micro entrepreneur. So this thing could be introduced in all the jails of India, train them to become self-independent when they move out of the jail, because most of the people, they commit crime because they don't know anything. If you train them to earn with respect, there's a good chance that they will do that. They will leave the crime once they will be out of the jail. Next is there should be accountability of police. Which means that if a prisoner is tortured, or if there is custodial death, there should be a fast track court which should be established, which will deal with which will punish the policeman during the time boundation. And lastly, we will need to replace the 1894 Act with a more modern, more humane, and a more prisoner friendly act which understands the requirement of the modern day. So this ends the third topic of the week, which is prison reforms. We will go for the fourth topic, which is tough battle between RBI and government on payment regulator board. So in the next week, we will be we will be analyzing the recent spat of RBI and government. We will be analyzing the reasons behind the spat and how it can affect the economy of India. That we will do next week. This week we will be only discussing the payment regulator board issue. So recently the RBI, so the Department of Economic Affairs, the Secretary of Department of Economic Affairs, in the Inter-Ministerial Committee meeting, has proposed the setting up of a payment regulator board. And this payment regulator board will oversee the functioning of the payment infrastructure in India, kind of the payment banks, the other things, all these things, every issue related to payment banks, your prepaid mobile instruments like Paytm and all, that will be taken care of by the Payment Regulator Board. So government or the Ministry of Finance has proposed that Payment Regulator Board would be an independent regulator outside the control of the RBI. So RBI will have no role to play in functioning of the Payment Regulatory Board. Only thing which the government says is that the chairman of PRB would be appointed by the government in consultation with the RBI governor. That will be the only that will be the only role of RBI in the payment regulatory infrastructure. The government says that this will ensure that the payment infrastructure in India will grow in a very systematic manner, and it will create more competition in the sector. The RBI has dissented on the proposal. The RBI has said that we will not do that. We don't want, or we don't support, we don't accept the idea of an independent payment regulatory board. And RBI has given following argument for that. RBI has said that even this payment infrastructure, these payment banks, they are also similar to the traditional banking system, and since the central bank oversees the functioning of all the banks in India, there is no solid reason why a differentiated bank would not be out or would not be in its ambit. I mean, when the RBI looks at all different kinds of banks, then why small banks, RRBA and all different kinds of banks, why should only the payment bank be not in its ambit? I mean, payment bank will not increase the burden on RBI. RBI has enough staff to take care of bank, and RBI is saying that we look at the financial sector in a holistic way, and if we want to look at it in a holistic way, each and every different kind of bank should come under us. So first argument is for holistic development of financial sector. Second is that creating a new structure, creating a new regulatory board would be expensive, because you have to start from scratch, you will have to train the staff, they will have to gain expertise, you will require new office, you will require new people. That will be costly. RBI already has established infrastructure, so RBI can oversee the functioning of payment bank in a less costly way. Thirdly, the RBI says that we have proven track record. See, this payment bank and this payment settlement system, it started to grow in India since 2007, and it's been 18 years, and India has become example in the world with respect to the growth of payment bank infrastructure. All the countries of the West are looking for India and looking for India as example. There have been no mishappening till now in 11 years. RBI has very well managed to regulate the payment bank system in India. So RBI is saying that if we have performed really well, if there is no problem, and the payment bank infrastructure has grown significantly in last 10 years, then why are you appointing, or why are you establishing a new regulator? We are doing our job well. I mean, you should think of establishing something when the current system has some problem, when it has failed or it has not been able to, do its function well. But when the current system is going really well, RBI has ensured that payment sector infrastructure grows as a good decent pace, and it till now there has been no frauds in that sector, why would you try and test with a new regulator? The new regulator will not have the experience, will not have a wide experience like RBI. RBI has been regulating from last 70 years. So RBI has the experience of managing banks. And fourth is that for better monetary policy. So RBI says that for monetary policy, for having impactful monetary policy, for having monetary transmission, RBI should have a control over all the channels of liquidity in the economy. And if it will not have control over the payment bank, which is also part of liquidity in the economy, then which is also part of the total money supply in the economy, then RBI says that its monetary policy will have limited impact on the monetary policy. It will have so even when RBI will reduce the repo rates or the CRR requirement, it will not translate into a reduction in or it will not translate into increase in liquidity in the economy, because the payment bank will not be under its control. So what is the middle ground in between? So experts are saying that we should have a middle ground which includes the views of both government and RBI. So they have suggested that to break this kind of impasse, what we require is that we should establish a payment regulatory board just like we have the monetary policy committee, and the regulatory board should have 3 members from the government and 3 members from the RBI, and the governor of RBI should have the casting vote in case of tie. This will actually include the views of government and also of the RBI. RBI will finally have the overall control over the PRB. Let's move to the next issue, which is the Benami Transaction Act. So recently this act was in news because government has constituted special courts, and they have notified special court and tribunals for trying the Benami transaction cases. So what do we mean by Benami? First of all, let's look into this. So suppose I am X and I am a bureaucrat and I earn a lot of money from corruption. And as you know that my legal source of income is very less, so I cannot buy a property. Now I buy a property in the name of Y, who is my driver. So actually it is me who is paying for the property, but it is actually the Y on whose name the property is registered. And Y does not have enough income to buy the property. So this type of property is called as Benami property. If the real owner of the land or real owner of property is it's someone else, and the person who is registered on the name, or the official person, he does not actually pay for the buying of the property. So who falls under the Benami transactions? So assets of, this is important for prelims, assets of any kind, movable, immovable, tangible, intangible, any right or interest or any legal documents. So even the gold and financial securities could also qualify for the Benami. So in 1988, first time Benami Transaction Prohibition Act was passed. And this act prohibits Benami transactions and provide legal provisions for confiscating of Benami properties. It also defines what is Benami property. But this act never came into practice because the rules which had to be, you have to, before act comes into force, you have to make rules for that. The rules were never made for last 26 years. So therefore, the government thought that we will now amend the Benami Transaction Act and we will also, establish the rules so that this act would come into force. So Benami Transaction Amendment Act was passed in 2016, and the key feature of the act included, first of all, it amends the definition of Benami transaction to widen the scope of legal action. Secondly, it establishes adjudicating authorities and appellate tribunals to deal with Benami transaction cases. It also provides immunity under the Benami Act to those who have declared their Benami properties under the income declaration scheme. It also provides punishment for those who are involved in this activity. So anyone who indulges in Benami transaction can face 7 years in jail. And those who furnish false information, he can remain 5 years in jail. Also, property under this act will be liable to be confiscated. And the state would pay no compensation for that. Also, there would be a initiating officer. So the legal structure under this would be something like that. So first there will be initiating officer who would inquire, and then there will be a departmental adjudicating authority. And suppose he has said that yes, that is a Benami transaction, therefore 5 years of jail. So you can appeal against the decision to the appellate tribunal. And from appellate tribunal, you can appeal to the High Court. So this is the process which will go under the Benami Transaction Prohibition Act. So what is the significance of the act? See, it will improve or it will increase transparency in the real estate market. See, real estate market in India is known to be the most corrupt market. All the black money is involved in that, and because of black money, the rates of houses and flats are artificially inflated. The demand is, and that makes it unaffordable for the middle class and for honest taxpayers like me and you to buy a property, because ultimately, because of the black money involved, because of under the table transactions. So suppose in market or on theory the cost of property is 50 lakhs, but in the informal market the cost is 80 lakhs. Now 80 lakhs for a flat would be very tough for a normal honest middle class person to give. So many honest or middle class people, for many middle class people, buying a flat or a house becomes unaffordable thanks to the involvement of black money in the real estate market, which artificially inflates the prices. So under the Benami Transaction Act, which will curb these Benami dealings, the prices of real estate would come to, or it will reflect the actual price based on the demand and supply, and that will reduce the prices of real estate market, and that would make houses and flats affordable for the common people. Also, the land and the money recovered by the government under the act could be used for development initiatives. So government can probably build a hospital in that land. The government can use that money for any pro-poor scheme. It can use that money for providing affordable housing to the poor. So that will also help the poor population. Now let's look at the concerns associated with this. So first concern is that it could lead to harassment. So probably sometimes the genuine transactions could be considered as benami, and once the property is taken and sold, and after 3 years, if it's proven that that transaction was not benami, in that case, there will be no way. The person will have no way to get compensation. So in India, where there are lack of clear land titles, many genuine cases could be dubbed as benami cases, and that could motivate the government to take away their property. Next is it has a post facto effect. Which means only when the benami transaction is done, the act comes into picture. It does not do anything to prevent the benami transaction. So this is also the concern raised by the experts. Now let's move to the next issue, which is again a very, very important issue, which is a panel appointed by the government has said that India should adopt the UN model on cross-border insolvency. So, Ministry of Finance has appointed Insolvency Law Committee to suggest amendments in the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code of India. And recently, this Insolvency Law Committee has recommended that India should adopt the UN or the UNICITRAL model law on cross-border insolvency. So before we go to the recommendations, which are not many, let us first understand what do we mean by cross-border insolvency and what is unicitral. So let us first understand what do we mean by cross-border insolvency. So cross-border insolvency laws means, what do we mean by cross-border insolvency? Suppose there is X firm, and X firm is in India and it has gone bankrupt. Now, according to the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, a bankrupt firm, if there is no other solution, its assets will be liquidated. Now, suppose the X firm has 40% assets in India and 60% assets in abroad, probably England. So what will happen? Because a government, a bank, the RBI, everyone can only have a jurisdiction over the assets over India. The assets in England, the creditors have no control over that. So that problem is solved by the cross-border insolvency laws. So cross-border insolvency law means that one country's law, insolvency law, would be accepted by the other country. And if there is an insolvency proceeding in suppose X country and there are some assets in Y country, so the government of Y country would help the X country in liquidating the assets of that company A, which are there in the Y country. There will be joint collaboration. Also, if there will be any verdict given by the court of X country with respect to liquidation of the assets or with respect to that company A, that decision will also be accepted by the court of a Y country. So this is what cross-border insolvency laws does. For example, in UK, in EU has a cross-border insolvency law, which means if any company goes bankrupt in Germany and that company has assets in Spain, in France, in Ireland, that will be, the laws of Germany will be recognized by Spain, France and Ireland, and the government of Spain, France and Ireland would first of all accept the decision of the court in Germany and would help the government of Germany in liquidating the assets of that company which are there in Spain, France and Ireland. So this is what the main thing is that. So under this insolvency and this cross-border insolvency laws, there is a problem. There is a term known as center of main interest. Center of main interest is a country where firstly the company has maximum kind of loan or maximum assets or maximum debt, and where the insolvency proceeding starts. So if suppose the insolvency proceeding starts in Germany and the company has major assets in Germany, then Germany would be termed or would be tagged as a center of main interest, and then all other countries where that company has assets, they would accept the verdict of the courts of Germany, and they would help the German government in liquidating the assets which are there in their own country. Now let's come to the next thing, which is the United Nations Commission on International Trade Law. So this is actually a core legal body of UN, and the job of This is to harmonize the trade laws of, or harmonize the international trade laws of all the countries, and harmonize the commercial laws of all countries, so that each and every country gives respect and gives recognition to the trade laws, to the commercial laws of the other country, and that will smoothen the process of international trade in the world. So this organization came out with a model law of cross-border insolvency. In 1997, and India has not adopted the model law of cross-border insolvency. So the model law has four basic principles with respect to cross-border insolvency. And these four basic principles are that there will be direct access to foreign insolvency professionals and foreign creditors. So if suppose, as we continue with the same example, if in Germany the insolvency proceeding is going on, then those people in France, in Spain, who has given loan to that company, who are also creditors, they will automatically participate in the insolvency proceedings happening in Germany. Similarly, the foreign insolvency professionals in France and Spain, they will also participate in the insolvency proceedings which is taking place in Germany. Next key principle of this is recognition of foreign proceedings and provision of remedies. Which I have already said, that if in Germany some verdict is made, that will be accepted by France and Spain and other countries. Third is there will be cooperation between domestic and foreign courts. And fourthly, there will be coordination between two or more concurrent insolvency proceedings in different countries. So if there will be against the same company, insolvency proceeding starts both in Germany and France, then both these countries will cooperate together. So what this committee appointed by Finance Commission said? It said that India should adopt the model law of cross-border insolvency. So as you know that India enacted the insolvency and bankruptcy code few years back, but the current scenario in India is that we have not adopted the model act on cross-border insolvency. So right now, if a company who is facing a bankruptcy and the process of liquidation is going on, liquidation means selling of the assets. So if that is going on, then in India's case, we have two choices to make. So we have two options. First is that if we sign a pact with Britain or with any other country, that if this thing happen in our country, and if we have if that company has asset in your country, then you will cooperate with us, right? So this we have signed with 8 or 9 countries. So with them, if there is a company which has asset in that country, then that country will cooperate and coordinate with us. First provision is that, or first option that we have is that. Second is that we give a letter of request by India that please help us. There is asset in your country of this kind of company. Please help to liquidate those assets so that that company can pay its creditors. Second is the option of begging. So right now we have two options. First, to sign individual deals or individual pact, and second is to appeal. If we sign the UN Model Act on or if we enact the UN Model Act on cross-border insolvency, then automatically we will not require signing with individual countries. Then automatically all those countries which has enacted the UN Model Act, they will cooperate with us when there will be a cross-border insolvency problem. And also it will create a confidence among investors in India. They will know that if there will be a problem, this country has signed the Model Act, and therefore even if we give loan and that company fails to repay back its assets which is spread all across the world, they could be liquidated and we will get the money back. So it will, first of all, it will improve the ease of doing business in India, and secondly it would bring confidence among the investors to invest in India. Let's move to the next issue, which is an op-ed, and it's a very interesting op-ed: India and the new face of globalization. So many of the experts are saying, what do we mean by globalization? Globalization is the integration of the world economy. So globalization is the integration of the world economies. So many experts are saying that recently, or with new times, we are facing the problem of what you call as increasing protectionism, and the countries and the system of globalization which started in 1990s, it's ending now. We are living in a world which is characterized by increasing protectionism, decrease in trade of goods between the countries. But according to the author of this op-ed, he says that globalization is not ending. Globalization is changing. It's not ending. So globalization, instead of ending, it is changing. Its nature is changing. So in the 1990s and 2000s, the kind of globalization we witnessed, it meant that there is increase in the trade of goods between the countries. Right? That was the kind of globalization we witnessed for the 2 decades. The kind of globalization that we are witnessing today is characterized by increase in trade in services. And that can be reflected by increasing the number of travelers crossing the international border from 0.5 billion to around 1.2 billion now. It is also reflected in Uber. Uber is now in 70 countries. It is reflected through Netflix. Netflix is now providing services in major countries of the world, in almost all the countries of the world. So now the new kind of, or the new wave of globalization is running, or its engine is technological development, technological change. With technology, it has become easier. It has become easier for a person sitting in one country to provide service in the other country. So see, historically, the countries have had trade of goods, but there was hardly any trade in services. Even though the price differential between trade in service, or between the price of services was enormous among the developed and the developing country. Let's take an example. A barber in India charges 50 rupees. A barber in Canada used to charge around $15, which is 750 rupees. So 50 and 750, which means that the labor in India was 15, or the barber services in India is 15 times cheaper than that of Canada. But a barber in India cannot go to Canada. The only way the price of services could reduce or it can equalize is through migration, when there will be migration from India to Canada. But that will not happen because every country has put a limit on immigration. It has not opened its border. Anyone can come and stay in Canada. So therefore, the service prices never exactly equalized. The differential in prices remain. But now with technology, it is possible not to cross the border to provide services. I mean, the outsourcing that the Indian companies are doing in India, we are not traveling the border. I mean, most of the projects we do, most of the, let's take example of CD. In Civils Delhi, a large number of coders that manage the website and the app are from ex-Soviet countries, Ukraine and all these, Azerbaijan, because a coder in these countries are cheaper than India, and they are providing the services from ex-Soviet countries to us without coming to India. They are sitting in their home and working for us. So this is what technology has made it possible. That now we don't need to cross the border. We can provide the services sitting in our country. And therefore, India has an advantage because India has always been a service-oriented country. We trade more in services than we trade in goods. The cost of labor in India is cheap. So if this technology will be driven, we could significantly increase the trade in services, and it will be favorable to us. We will have a trade surplus. But the problem is that there is some challenges in realizing that advantage. Even though we have comparative advantages in trade and services, because services in India is cheaper compared to the rest of the world, which means, see, in goods we are not competitive. In most of the goods, even in the labor intensive goods like Vietnam, garment and all these wool, we are facing tough competition from Bangladesh and Vietnam and all these countries. In high-tech goods, we are not as competitive as the West. But when we talk of services, we have a cheaper labor. We have a people who can work at a cheaper price than anyone who would be working in US. अभी तक प्रॉब्लम क्या होती थी कि यूएस के लोगों को इंडिया के लोगों को बुलाना पड़ता था यूएस में, ताकि वो वहां पे कम सैलरी में काम करें. राइट. अब क्या हो सकता है पॉसिबल कि, और उसमें दिक्कत क्या थी कि वहां के लोकल लोग कहते थे भाई हमारी जॉब छीन रही है, ये लोग ज्यादा आ रहे हैं तो हम लोग का क्या होगा, दे विल बिकम मेजॉरिटी एंड ऑल. अब क्या हो गया है पॉसिबल दैट अ पर्सन सिटिंग इन गुड़गांव एंड बैंगलोर कैन वर्क फॉर अ कंपनी इन यूएस and can do the project in Gurgaon and Bangalore for them at a 1/4 price. Right? So this is a comparative advantage that we have. लेकिन प्रॉब्लम क्या है कि इस चैलेंज को अगर हमें we have advantage, but to realize that potential, we will have to invest in human capital. प्रॉब्लम क्या है, ये सब चीजें ऐसे तो नहीं होंगी। अगर आपको बाहर इफ यू हैव टू सेल, इफ यू हैव टू प्रोवाइड सर्विसेज, हाई टेक सर्विसेज, टेक्नोलॉजी सर्विसेज, you need a people with skills who can manage IT, who can provide services online. So we need them. But अगर आप इंडिया की हालत देखेंगे तो इंडिया में less than 4 million people receive skill training, right? Also अगर हम बात करेंगे 17% गवर्नमेंट स्कूल्स हैं who provide or less than 17% government schools provide 1 or 2 years of pre-primary education. Less than 15% of rural children in grade 2 can read at the expected level. So हमारे यहाँ जो human capital है उसकी हालत बहुत खराब है. It's very bad. And therefore, without investing in the human capital, without developing skills, we cannot take advantage of this new technological revolution. This is what the author says, that India will need to invest, we need to provide skill training, we need to focus more on human capital than on physical capital. Only then we can take part, or we can realize the potentials being offered from a new kind of globalization which is taking place across the world. So this ends the 7th issue of the week. Let's move to the next issue, which is India and Myanmar sign MOU towards Sitwe port operationalization. So as you know that India, and this topic I have already discussed, the Sitwe port, the Kaladan multimodal project and how it will help India. So I will not discuss again. I will just read it out, and you can watch my previous lecture in which I have explained how this Kaladan multimodal project will help the Northeast. So in this project, so now Sitwe port, through which Northeast India would be connected, India and Myanmar has signed a MOU for the appointment of private port operator for the operation and maintenance of Sitwe port. So we have signed a MOU, and now the tender will be released, and the private operators will apply for a tender, and anyone who will do the lowest bid will be given the job of maintaining and operating the Sitwe port. Let's move to the next issue, which is it time to introduce wholesale banks in India? So NBFC, as you know, in India, the NBFC is having a problem. The ILFS crisis has recently happened. So NBFC are facing 3-4 main problems. First problem is that most of them are witnessing a fall in their valuation. Secondly, banks have stopped, or banks have reduced lending to NBFC. And thirdly, its bond yield has increased. It's increasing. Why is bond yield increasing? Because the investors, after the ILFS crisis, it is not considering NBFC to be safe investment. The investors are fearing that, like ILFS, the NBFCs will default, right? And bonds have and confidence have the indirect relation. So a company like the US Treasury bond. US Treasury bond is considered to be the safest asset because US government never defaults. So therefore the interest rate of US Treasury bond is very low. But for high risk companies, the bond, the interest rate offered by the bond is usually high to motivate the investors to invest. So because of decreasing confidence on NBFCs, the bond yield is decreasing, or the bond yield is it's kind of increasing. The reason behind this crisis is because of asset liability mismatch problem faced by NBFC. See, problem is that in India, long term, the most of the liabilities of the NBFCs are short term in nature, because these NBFCs cannot arrange a long term source of fund. They usually issue commercial papers, or they issue 3 years or 5 years bond, and after 3 years, after 1 year, after 5 years, they have to repay the investors. But the projects which it lent to, they are generally the infrastructure projects. They are generally the projects which have long gestation period. So their source of funding is short term, and their investments, which is part of the asset, are long term. And this creates a asset liability mismatch. That आपको पैसा यहाँ से मिल रहा है, आप जहां से पैसा उठा रहे हो वहां आपको बहुत जल्दी देना है, 2-3 साल में, लेकिन जहां पैसा इन्वेस्ट कर रहे हो जिन प्रोजेक्ट्स में, वहां पे you will get returns after 10-15 years. So that creates a asset liability mismatch problem. तो इसका सोल्यूशन जो एक्सपर्ट्स हैं वो ये कह रहे हैं कि let the NBFCs also be given the, or let RBI should also give them the LOR tag, which is lender of last resort tag. तो experts are saying कि lender of last resort अगर NBFC को मिल जाएगा तो it will boost investment confidence कि भाई अगर ये default भी करता है तो RBI will say, lender of last resort जो होता है वो बैंक के पास होता है कि अगर बैंक फेल हुआ तो अल्टीमेटली RBI will bail out the bank, it will give loan to the bank. ये NBFC में नहीं है, because NBFC does not have to pay SLR and CRR which the normal banks have to do or have to keep reserve. तो दैट इज वाई ये जो लेंडर ऑफ लास्ट वो है रिजॉर्ट है, ये एनबीएफसी के पास इंस्ट्रूमेंट नहीं है. इन्वेस्टर्स आर सेइंग कि यू गिव दैट LOLR, दैट विल बूस्ट द इन्वेस्टर्स कॉन्फिडेंस इन एनबीएफसीज. लेकिन प्रॉब्लम क्या है कि इफ दैट विल हैपन, then first of all it will create a problem of moral hazard. NBFC loans are already risky, it will become more risky because they will know that even if they fail, RBI will always, it is always there to give them more loan. Secondly, banks will then feel cheated because banks have to do unnecessary burden of keeping SLR, of keeping CRR, and if NBFC without doing that, if it will have LOR responsibility, it will create unfair competition. भाई या तो NBFC सब चीज वही करे जो कि बैंक भी करता है कि वो CRR भी रखे, वो SLR भी रखे. अगर वो नहीं रख रहा है तो इसके बदले मतलब बैंक को ये चीज रखनी पड़ रही है, बट बैंक गेट्स एन एक्स्ट्रा एडवांटेज उस चीज के बदले कि RBI गिव्स देम लेंडर ऑफ लास्ट रिजॉर्ट थिंग. लेकिन अगर एनबीएफसी को भी वही चीज मिल जाएगी, देन बैंक्स विल फील चीटेड. बैंक्स विल फील भाई हम सब रख भी रहे हैं और हमें कुछ एक्स्ट्रा चीज भी नहीं मिल रही है. So that is why that is not a feasible option. So experts are saying that we should go for a wholesale bank, wholesale long-term bank. So wholesale बैंक का जो concept है, that concept was introduced in 2014. First time जब नचिकेत बोर्ड कमेटी बनी थी, which had recommended on differentiated banking, वहाँ पे it has proposed that India needs or we need to establish a wholesale bank. So wholesale bank का क्या criteria था उस समय जो उन्होंने डिसाइड किया था, वो ये था A wholesale bank will be started by people who will have minimum 100 crores capital. यहाँ पे in the wholesale bank there will be no demand deposit and minimum जो capital वहां पे आपको रखनी पड़ेगी that will be 5 crore rupees. So this bank will not be for aam aadmis, it will be for high net worth investors who wants to keep their money in which gives them good interest, and that money would be kept as a fixed deposit, as a term deposit. Which means if a term deposit is 5 years, then before 5 years that person cannot withdraw the money from the wholesale bank. So wholesale and wholesale bank will don't have to meet the SLR needs, though CRR उसको रखना पड़ेगा. Now, how will wholesale banks solve the problem or solve the asset liability problem of which is faced by NBFCs? पहली बात तो ये है कि now it will get money for long term. The source of funding will be for long term because only fixed deposit it will take. So for 5 years, for 10 years, its money will be safe, right? So it will incentivize them to lend to infrastructure projects which have a long-term gestation period, because now there will be no asset liability mismatch. Now the source of fund will also be for long term and the loan which it will give also be for the long term. Also, this wholesale bank will be a specialized bank, which means it will be it will only lend to these infrastructure projects, these high end projects. वो हमारे ऐसे लोगों को लोन नहीं देगा 10-20 लाख 50 लाख 1 करोड़, वो 50 करोड़ 100 करोड़ के ही लोन देगा. एंड दैट लोन विल ऑल्सो बी गिवन टू इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर प्रोजेक्ट्स फॉर बिग काइंड ऑफ कॉर्पोरेट्स एंड ऑल. सो दिस विल बी अ स्पेशलाइज्ड ऑर्गेनाइजेशन एंड उसके पास ऐसी टीम बैठी होगी विच विल एनालाइज द प्रोजेक्ट रिपोर्ट एंड द प्रोजेक्ट प्रपोजल. बेस्ड ऑन दैट एनालिसिस इट विल डिसाइड कि हाँ दिस प्रोजेक्ट इज फीजिबल. I think there's a good chance that it will be successful. Therefore, we can give loan to them. अभी क्या होता है कि जो banks होते हैं, banks don't have that expertise because banks give loan to all kinds of people. NBFC के साथ भी यही है, it gives loan to all kinds of people. So since it gives loan to all kinds of people, they don't have any extra expertise for giving loans to for infrastructure purposes. लेकिन यहाँ पे this body will solely cater to the big investors, to the specialized projects. So they will, during the course of years, they will develop expertise in deciding which loan is or which project is feasible and which project has certain amount of risk. तो उससे क्या होगा, उससे जो NPA प्रॉब्लम है इन लॉन्ग रन वो भी इमर्ज नहीं होगी. क्योंकि NPA प्रॉब्लम का इमर्ज होने का एक बहुत बड़ा रीजन ये है कि ऐसे लोगों को लोन दिया गया जो लोग केपेबल नहीं थे रीपे करने का, और जो सिलेक्शन किया गया इट वाज नॉट साइंटिफिक. बट होलसेल बैंक, बिकॉज सिंस इट्स अ स्पेशलाइज्ड बैंक, it will kind of take care of these, or it will know which projects to invest, which projects to avoid, and therefore there will be less chances of NPA problem being developed. So और तीसरा फायदा क्या होगा कि इन्वेस्टर जो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर प्रोजेक्ट्स है उनको भी लॉन्ग टर्म लोन मिल जाएगा. दैट इज ऑल, एंड दैट विल गिव बूस्ट टू द इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर सेक्टर. सो दैट इज व्हाई एक्सपर्ट्स आर सेइंग दैट we should introduce a new concept of wholesale bank in India, and that will solve the problems being faced by NBFC and the banks. Let's move to the next issue, which is a OPID snap on the direct tax base in India. So the recent data shows that the number of tax or the tax base or the direct tax base in India has improved. तो अब जो है more and more people are filing returns, more and more people are paying taxes. So according to the stats, in 2017 and 18, the direct tax to GDP ratio rose to 5.98%, which is the highest in last 10 years. Also, the tax buoyancy factor increased to 1.81%. What do we mean by tax buoyancy? Tax buoyancy means that if suppose GDP growth rate increases, and if tax revenue increases at a greater pace than the growth of GDP, then we can call the tax system to be buoyant. So suppose GDP grows at 5% and tax revenue collection without increasing the tax rate increases by 10%, then we can say that tax is buoyant. So in India, the tax buoyancy ratio it is 1.81%, which means that the direct tax system has become more buoyant. So why has direct tax base and tax collection improved? There are 3-4 factors. Government has launched schemes like Operation Insight. There is now the filing of taxes is much more easier. You can do it online. There are less number of documents required. It's a less cumbersome process. Also, there is better gathering of information from all the sources. After demonetization, government has got more information about the actual income of the money, and this has motivated them to file tax returns because they know that they have deposited that much money in banks and income tax department will know about it, so they should file the income tax returns. And also there are some the easing of process. All this helped in increasing the tax base and increasing the direct tax collection in India. So, but even though the direct tax collection in India is high, still out of total tax collection, 52% comes from direct taxes and 48% comes from indirect taxes. Which means that almost the share of indirect taxes is almost equal to the share of direct taxes. Compare it to the Western countries. If you talk of Western economies, the share of direct taxes around 70 to 75%. And the share of indirect taxes is 25 to 30%. And this share of direct tax in the total tax collection is decreasing in last 5-6 years. So it was 60% in 2009 and 10. Now it is 52%. So that is a problem area. Even though there is increase in tax collection, direct tax collection, there is increase in the direct tax base, but in the total tax collection, the share of direct taxes have been decreasing over the years, and even now almost half of India's tax revenue comes from indirect taxes. Now, why this is a problem? This is a problem because direct taxes have serious advantages over the indirect taxes. So let's look at the advantages. First is direct tax is progressive and indirect tax is regressive. Progressive and regressive means when we talk of if a tax is progressive, it means that as the income of person increases, his tax liability also increases. So if a person earned 10 lakh rupees in India and more, he has to pay 30% tax. If between 5 to 10 lakh he earns, he has to pay 20%. Between 2.5 to 5, he has to pay 10%. Right, so he has to pay more taxes. But when we talk of indirect taxes, it is a regressive tax, which means as the income of person increases, the tax percentage he has to pay decreases. Let's take a simple example to understand this. Suppose I am X and the person is Y. My income is rupees 1000 rupees per month. The Y's income is rupees 1 lakh per month. Now we both buy salt. Salt, so you all have to buy, even the rich have to buy salt, even the poor have to buy salt. So the cost of salt in a month is 100 rupees and the tax on salt is 10%, which is equal for everyone, for the rich person also, for the poor person also. So 10% of rupees 100 means rupees X has to pay rupees 10 as taxes to the government for buying salt, and Y also has to pay rupees 10 as tax to the government. Now rupees 10 or rupees 10 as tax is 1% of the income of X. So X, who is a poor man, has to pay 1% of income, 1% of his income as tax. But Y, rupees 10 is 0.001% of his income. So even though the person Y is much richer than person X, still they have to pay similar amount of tax, which means if we talk of percentage wise, X has to pay more amount of tax to the government and Y, who is a rich person, has to pay less amount of tax to the person. This is the problem of equity. Indirect taxes means that the burden on poor will be more. When a country earns more income from indirect tax, it means it is putting more burden on the poor sections of the society. Second reason why we know this is because of awareness, or it makes the people, or it makes the government accountable. See, when you pay indirect tax, you don't feel really concerned because it's with the amount, I mean, with the bill, and that the amount is not very high. So you don't pay much attention to that, the indirect tax you are paying. But when a direct tax, when you have to, when from your salary, if 30% of your salary is completely transferred to the government, then that creates a problem. I mean, that hurts you a lot. So you became more aware that I am giving my 30% of my income to the government. So government should better utilize my income. It should not waste my income in building cow ambulances, in building statues. It should use my money in building infrastructure, in building parks, in focusing on health and education. So it makes the citizens more aware. It makes them more kind of questioning that I am the taxpayer. You have to tell me where my tax, or why are you wasting my tax money, or what has happened to my tax money. So that that creates an accountable government. Next is certainty. So in terms of income tax or direct tax, government is certain that it will get this amount of tax revenue from the people. It knows the income of the people. It knows it will have this amount of tax. When we talk of indirect tax, it's not certain. If a person, because it depends on consumption. If a family does not consume, he will not pay any tax. That is also a problem. Next is, it is anti-inflationary. So whenever the government wants to reduce demand, or wants to reduce inflation in an economy, it increases the direct tax rate. Because when direct tax rate will increase, the actual income of people will decrease, which will decrease their demand. And when demand will decrease, inflation will reduce. So what are the reasons for low direct tax share in India? First of all, poverty is the biggest reason. When people don't earn more than 2.5 lakhs, when most of the population are earn below that, how will you have a big tax base? People will have to earn now, only then they will pay tax. Now you will have to earn at least 2.5 lakhs. Now then only you have to pay tax. But if you don't earn that much, then you will not have. Then the tax base will be small. So India's case, this is the main reason. I mean, people have small, low incomes, therefore they are outside the tax ambit. Next is agriculture income in India is exempted from taxation. So this is also a problem. I mean, when agriculture is exempted and 70% of India's population earns from or at least 60% of them earns from agriculture, then in one go 60% of people don't pay taxes. Next is the corporate profitability over the years have been increasing or have been decreasing, which means they have less money to pay, or which means they have less profit, means less tax for the government. Fourthly, we have informal economy. Most of these chole bhature walas, kulche walas, golgappe walas, barbers, they don't pay any taxes because they are not registered with the government. They are working completely in the informal sector. And as you know that 85 to 90% of India's economy is employed in informal sector. Therefore, even if they earn more, they are not within the formal system. Therefore, they don't pay taxes. Next is there is tax exemption in India. So much tax exemption for the corporates. This also reduces the total taxable money. So what are the reforms which are needed? Firstly, we need to have a low rate of tax for people with lower income and high rate of tax for higher income. If you would have studied economics basics, you would have know about the Laffer curve, which is a U-shaped curve, and it says that when the tax rate is reduced, it increases the tax revenue up to a certain level. So up to a certain level, when you decrease the tax, it will increase the tax revenue, and it's opposite. When tax rate increases after a certain level, the revenue or the tax revenue decreases. The reason being, at a very high tax level, it will disincentivize them to work. They will stop working because they will believe that there is no need to work because ultimately most of them the government will take. So it discourages the effort, it discourages the work, and that ultimately leads to lower tax revenue. And therefore, when you reduce tax rates, it actually increases the tax revenue. So this is the main rule, that the taxation should be moderate, because moderate taxation would incentivize people to work. It will also incentivize them to compile. Next is the threshold for income tax has to be revised periodically to counter the effects of inflation. Next is agriculture income should be taxed. Also, government should also implement the the recommendations of Tax Administrative Reform Commission. TER, it has given certain recommendations like merging of CBEC and CBDT. It also said that it also recommended use of PAN for transactions. Next is government should focus on increasing the income of people, because ultimately till people will remain poor, they will not pay taxes. I mean, they will not earn that much that they will be they would be in a situation to pay tax. And lastly, a new direct code should be brought. See, income tax in India is governed by the IT Act 1961, which is a old and redundant act meant for a socialist economy. Very complicated, very cumbersome. Now that we have moved towards market economy, we need a act which is more simple, which is less vague, which is less prone to misuse by the tax authorities. So this ends the issue in the net on the direct tax space. So let's move to the last main topic, which is why there should be more pedestrians. So there was an op-ed which came in Live Mint, and recently, I mean, when we talk of so much pollution going on in Delhi, everywhere, I mean, Delhi is, if those people who are not in Delhi, you should never come to Delhi, because living in Delhi is like living in a gas chamber. There is so much pollution here that you can't go out. It's like living in a gas chamber where everybody is coughing in this season. So those who are not in Delhi, you should never come to Delhi. That's my first session to you. Next is, so there have been talks of how to solve the problem of pollution in our cities, because as you know, most of our metro cities are very, very polluted. So this author has said that we should try for a non-motorized model in the center of the city. So this model have been implemented in many cities of the world. So this model says that in the heart of the city, only the bicycles or only you can walk. The cars are not allowed in the heart of the city. So this model has been implemented by Madrid, Paris, New York, Portland, Tokyo, some parts of Tokyo, Kyoto, Copenhagen introduced this part. It banned the motorized vehicles in 1960s. Sao Paulo has banned the movement of traffic on Sunday in 2.8 kilometer stretch. So different kind of cities of the world have tried this model, where in the core of the city they have stopped the use of motor vehicles. Only cycles and only walking is allowed in the center of the city. So there are large number of advantages of using or implementing this model. First of all, the air quality would improve. Because motor vehicle is probably the most important reason why the air of the cities has become so bad. So when there will be no motor vehicle in the middle of the city, it will mean that the environment will become more clean, the air will become more clean, there will be less emission of PM. Next is, it would lead to improvement in the quality of life. So people will they will walk more, there will be more physical exercise of the people, which will mean that they will remain fit. Also there would be more interaction among the citizens. Thirdly, it would lead to higher reliance on the use of bicycle. Fourthly, it would lead to increase in the cultural expression. So see, in a non-motorized city, people will walk, and usually in the cities where this model has been implemented, it has led to more street theater, more local dance and songs being kind of brought into the road, more street wall art, more marathons, more open theaters, more live musicians, more food walks. I mean, it technically it re-energizes the cities. It gives you, it brings you to a system where a city looks like a carnival, and that has happened actually in some areas in Paris. If you go where there is no vehicle, you will see the graffitis, you will see live musicians, you will see live rock bands performing, you will see street magicians, you will see people dancing on the street theaters. This actually, this is all a city all about. When we compare it with Indian cities, pop 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 pop, pop, traffic traffic traffic, everybody yelling at each other, no communication among the people, everybody looks frustrated with the traffic jams. So the cultural part, the difference between urban and rural areas, not just good roads, it's because urban areas are culturally more rich and more diverse than the rural areas. Once we do that, this will be once we implement this would reignite the cultural expression in a city. Next is it would improve it will increase the equity in cities. So in majority of people in Indian cities don't own a car, but they have to bear the burden of pollution which is generated by the rich of the city, the rich people of the city. So this would mean that neither rich nor poor will do any kind of pollution. So nobody will have to face pollution because of the actions of the others. So therefore, it has been recommended that we should also introduce this kind of model in Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, non-motorized transport that will increase the health of the people, and that will also reduce the pollution, and it will improve the aesthetics of the city. It will reignite the cultural expression of the city. So there is one more main issue, which is India and Bangladesh sign a standard operating procedure with respect to ports. I mean, this issue I have already discussed in detail in one of my lecture. There is just factual information in that. So rather than see things which I have already discussed, the notes will be there. So I will not be repeating it again, because ultimately there are so many issues to cover in one year that I cannot afford to be repetitive, which means I cannot afford to take same issue again and again in my lectures. I will ensure that I will bring new issues, new topics. I will teach new topics in every lecture so that you can get maximum by watching these lectures, so that you can have the maximum. I mean, I want to improve the cost benefit analysis of the lecture. If I will keep on repeating same news which came 1 month back, there is some development in that news after 1 month, I again explain the whole issue. So that will, technically that will waste your time, and that will mean that I will cover less issue over the years. So that issue you should read from the notes. It's all factual. If you have any doubt, you can always ping me, but I don't think that you will have any doubt after reading this. So let's start with prelims issue now. So Invest India wins the UN Award for Excellence in promoting investment in sustainable development. So, Invest India, first of all, let me tell you what is Invest India. Invest India is a national investment promotion and facilitation agency of India, and it acts as a first reference point for investors in India. So any foreign investor who wants to invest in India, he will go to the office of Invest India, or he will go to the website, and he will ask for information that I want to invest this much amount in India. Which are the sectors which I should invest to? Which are the regions which I invest to? What is the process of investment? What kind of clearances will I have to take? Everything. It's a one-stop shop which will provide you all kinds of information on investment processes in India. So Invest India, it's a joint venture company. These are pre-related facts. And it is operationalized in 2010, and it is a joint venture company between DIP, Department of Industrial Promotion and Policy. It has 35% share. Then there is FICCI, which has 51% share, and there is state government, which has 0.5% share, and the rest is miscellaneous. So technically it's a private body, it's not a government body, because the maximum share is owned by FICCI, which is a private body, which is not a government body. So Invest India has got a UN award for excellence in promoting investments in sustainable development. So Invest India has promoted a major global wind turbine company to establish a blade manufacturing plant in India. And this, after this project will be established or it will be completed, it will produce 1 gigabytes of renewable energy, and this would boost the sustainable growth in India. So this award is given to countries and institutions which tries to bring sustainable growth or sustainable development in a country. Let's move to the next issue, which is PM Modi awarded with the Seoul Peace Prize. So PM Modi has recently been awarded the Seoul Peace Prize. So Seoul Peace Prize was established in 1990, and it is given to those people who have made their mark through contribution to the harmony of mankind, reconciliation between nation, and to the word peace. So according to this award, PM Modi's Modinomics has been reducing social and economic disparity between the rich and the poor, and it has also been given because of the Modi's measures like demonetization, which according to the award has brought transparency into the system. Let's move to the next topic, which is Cabinet Nod for Indian Institute of Skills. So the Union Cabinet has approved the setting up of IAS. So it was already established 2 years back. Now government has said it will establish Indian Institute of Skills in different parts of India on a PPP model. Indian Institute of Skills will provide high quality skill training, applied research education, and a kind of skill training which is relevant to the industry. Right now, the problem is that the ITIs and the industry, or the education, the academy and the industry, they are disconnected. What academic teaches, the kind of skills, they have become redundant for the industry. So this Indian Institute of Skill, what it will do is that it will bring expertise of both government and private sector, and it will link the academy in the academia and the industry, so that the skill training would be provided in on those areas which the industry actually requires. Next is Main Nahi Hum portal and app. So this app has been launched for IT professionals who wants to work towards social causes and who wants to, do some service to the society. Next is government notifies rules on granting citizenship. So there have been a problem of 30,000 Pakistani citizens who have been there in India since 2011, and they have been given long-term visas. And around 2 lakh people have been, according to one estimate, 2 lakh citizens have been living in India. So what the government did was that government has empowered the DC of certain districts in 7 states to accept online application to grant citizenships to persecuted minorities from Pakistan, Afghanistan and Bangladesh living in India. So अब क्या होगा कि if these people who are living in India, if they become eligible for citizenship, they will apply for citizenship online, and they will get the status of their application also online. They can see that what is the application, and after that, after the application, the state will verify, and after verification it will grant citizenship to these people. Next is government has launched web portal for Spark scheme. So Spark scheme was launched in government was launched by government in August 2018. Now it has launched a web portal for the Spark scheme. So Spark portal has been launched by the HRD ministry, and it aims to improve the research ecosystem of India's higher education institutions by facilitating academic and research collaborations between Indian institutions and the best institution of the world. So the top 100 institutes of India will collaborate with the best universities of the world to undergo or to undertake joint research. So under this scheme, 600 joint research proposals will be awarded for 2 years to facilitate strong research collaboration between Indian research groups with the best in the class faculty in the leading universities of the world. So if we talk of India, top 100 universities will be selected, and they will collaborate with top 500 universities of the world. And the thrust areas will be 5. There will be 5 thrust areas: fundamental research, emergent areas of impact, convergence, action oriented research, and innovation driven. These will be the 5 areas of research. So under this program, there would be a long-term stay and visits of top international faculties to Indian institutions. So anybody who teaches in Harvard can come to IIT and stay and teach. Same can go vice versa. Indian research students can go and use the lab of Harvard University. They can use the lab of Oxford University. All this thing is a integral feature of this program. Next is creation of fisheries and aquaculture infrastructure development fund. So the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs has established. So as you know that fishery is a state subject. So center has a very limited role to play in that. So FIDF has been established by the central government, and this will provide concessional loans to the state government and the state entities, cooperatives, individuals, and entrepreneurs for taking up identified investment activities of fisheries development. So what it will do is that it will fund the state government, the institutions, and the individuals who wants to do something in the area of fisheries development. It's kind of a bank, you know. And then there will be terms of repayment, which is not important for your prelims. What is important for your prelims is that NABARD and National Cooperation Development Corporation and all scheduled banks will be the nodal loaning entities. Next issue is Harit Diwali, Swasth Diwali campaign. So this campaign was launched by Ministry of Environment last year in Delhi to make the students aware that there is no point in bursting crackers. Instead of that, you should focus on increasing lightning, in increasing the diyas, and in helping the poor. So, and in gifting plants, saplings to each other. So this reduced the pollution effect last year. So now the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change has said that we will launch this initiative in all over the country this year. Next is expert groups to cut school bag weights formed. So the government has recently it has formed an expert group which will decide the amount of school bag weight which the children will carry to the school. So in May, the Madras High Court has ordered the center to frame a policy on school bag weight, because school bag weight has led to problems of bone among children. I mean, I don't know about you people, but I still know that when I was in school, the amount of weight was, and I was very thin. I was like, when I was in class 8th, I was 30 probably, or 35 kg. And the amount of weight was around 10 to 15 kgs. So this ultimately, had some problem of my back. And that problem is being faced by many students. So, I mean, this is not a bodybuilding competition. And actually, in schools in abroad, I can tell you about my experience. In schools in which I have studied abroad, they have a policy where you have to come to school without bag. You don't have to bring any bag, because after in the lower classes, after the school, all the books you kind of submit. You have been given a locker. So you submit all the books in that locker and you go home without books, and you come to school without books, so you don't have any burden of weight to carry. This can be introduced in India also, but I don't think it will be, no government will do that. So the court has said that you should frame a policy. So based on that, government has created an expert group, and that expert group will decide the weight of the bag according to the age. So there have been some states which have already done. So Maharashtra and Telangana have placed the policy that the weight of school bag would not exceed 10% of the weight of the student. So the Ministry of last news is Ministry of Home Affairs has said that it will not allow renaming of Bengal. So Mamata Banerjee has said that he will rename West Bengal into Bengal. So Ministry of Home Affairs said that if you name it Bengal, then that will actually confuse the people with Bangladesh. So therefore it has said that we have apprehensions with the name change. Now why this issue is important? Because the state government can change the name of a city without the help or without the permission from union government. But for changing the name of the state, it has to take permission, or the parliament has to pass the bill under the Article 3 of the Indian Constitution. So the process is just like that president approves the bill will only be introduced in the parliament with the prior recommendation of the president. Once president recommends, the president will send the bill to the state legislature for its approval, for its views on it. And it mandates the time that you have to send your views within 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. But the views and the opinion of the state government is not mandatory on the parliament. The parliament can accept or refuse the viewpoint of the state legislature, and that has happened in the case of Telangana. So this is the process how a name of a state is changed, and the bill will be passed by a simple majority. So this ends the prelims and mains issues of the week. Next week there will be a delay of 1 to 2 days in upload of the lecture, because all the team of Civils Daily is, some people are going home and everyone, so there will be so instead of Sunday, the videos will be uploaded on Tuesday. So I wish you a very, very happy Diwali, and you should take a break of 2 days, probably 2-3 days, but don't lose focus and prepare well for your exam, and play safe, cracker-free Diwali like I play from last 5-6 years. Thank you.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon on the YouTube app and never miss another update from Civil State.